Okay, so again, my name is Ann Contreras. I'm the Director of Programs, one of the national trainers for our super amazing team at Pure Edge. Just know I do have a counseling therapy background. I'm also doing doctoral research, primarily on somatic psychology, which is embodied scholarship. And my focus is interventions of breath work for emotional states, primarily depression, anxiety, and any symptoms having to do with PTSD. I also have a foundation in trauma, and I am a pretty consistent meditation practitioner. So I've been meditating for over 15 years consistently. Yeah, it's a long time because I remember my first meditation retreat. Everybody does. It's agonizing. And wonderful at the same time. So funny. But then also just cultivating it over the years for that. And then I started formally teaching a meditation practice 2011, 12. Wow, so pretty close to a decade. Yeah, so that's a little bit of my information on a mindfulness practice. And you know, all of our ideas of a mindfulness practice will differ. So I try to do all of them. I do a movement, right? I do a lot of the yoga practices, other forms of movement. Walking can be designated also as a mindful meditation practice because, you know, you're trying to be present to that moment without judging it. And then ultimately breath work is also a mindfulness meditation practice. And then another one is seated. Ultimately the seated meditation practice, not that it tops it all, but it just kind of like brings it all together. Okay. So a couple of things I did want to mention in terms of aspects and benefits to a seated meditation practice. So just in terms of the aspects, just allowing yourself to be fully present to whatever comes up, whether your eyes are open or closed. I invite you to close the eyes to see what that feels like, or if you yours normally close your eyes, there are some practices where you can keep your eyes open and just take the gaze inward and down, right? So just see what happens when you're being fully present to this practice. The other things too are some of the aspects that have been aligned, again, also with the mindful meditation practice, is being able to see things a little bit more clearly. Because even though we have thousands of thoughts going through our head consistently, every moment, every second, the mindfulness meditation practice actually enables that ability to just slow things down. There's kind of like this false interpretation that, oh, you just want to close all your thoughts out. No, that's not really what happens. I don't know that the brain has the capacity to be able to do that. The main, eventually what we want to work up towards is just to be able to like slow it all down. Okay. Also too, you want to let go of judgment, no judgment in this moment, right? So if because we're going to start out with 10 minutes. And if you're only able to do 2 minutes of it or 30 seconds of it, and then you just keep coming back to that moment, you keep breathing through it, that's where you are. Okay. So for me to really come into a consistent meditation practice, it took me like 5-7 years. The first 2 years, I did study with a particular teacher, and I went to a weekly group sit for 2 years just to get myself disciplined enough to practice. Okay. And again, that's what worked for me, right? Also too, eventually, one of the aspects of it is learning how to be equanimous. When we go back to our own self-regulation and what that means, our own emotional regulation. When things are happening, you might be in the mode of crisis. We really want to be able to, in certain situations like that, or even if things are just very excitable, come into that moment of clarity without judgment and feeling even-keeled, right? How am I handling this in this situation so that things feel out of balance, so that I can think clearly and probably troubleshoot, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? Bringing it back to that moment, allowing yourself to pause. Allowing everything to belong, right? Everything's just inclusive. again, which brings it back to being present in that moment. Cultivating a beginner's mind. Yeah, so even though I'm a consistent practitioner, I always try to remind myself that every time I come into a seated meditation sit, I am here and I'm always starting at the beginning, every time. It's just like also doing a yoga practice or any form of movement. You're always coming back to it with the beginner's mind because it allows it to continue to be fresh and you stay in that moment of creativity. Be patient with yourselves, which also goes back to the no judgment part, right? So we want to be patient with our practice. Enable yourself to make a friend with yourself, because sometimes our thought process is like, we're not really friends with ourselves. And really that's the whole part of bridging, part of that mindfulness practice, being really friendly and kind to ourselves. And again, honoring ourselves in the practice, forever how long we do it. Could be 2 minutes, could be 5 minutes, could be 10 minutes, could be daily for 2 hours, all that good stuff. Okay. Benefits. So I remember going to not one of ours, but our team went to a conference just on mindfulness practices. And I remember one of the researchers mentioning at that time, I think this was more than like 2-3 years ago, when they started doing research on the benefits of mindfulness practices, whatever they were, seated meditation, breath work, yoga practices, movement, dance, walk, etc. They were probably like end of the 80s, beginning of the 90s, 60 studies on mindfulness. And then again, this was 2 to 3 years ago. And then the researcher mentioned now there's like over 600, 700 studies on the benefits of a mindful practice. Again, whatever that may be for you. Today, we're going to focus on the seated, for this week, we're going to focus on the seated meditation practice, right? So just being aware of that. So some of the benefits, right? The research shows stress reduction, improving work memory and focus, working memory and focus, right? Physical benefits, it helps increase better sleep, creative problem solving, right? Fewer feelings of loneliness, improve self-esteem, and again, going back to that mood regulation, okay? I had an example that came to mind. I just remember being in grad school at the time, and I was doing my clinical practicum for 8 hours a day, but then we still had class at night, and then after class at night, I would still have to transition and start doing papers, right? So very long day. Full 8 hours of clinical practicum work in counseling therapy. And then what was my transition between all of that? Dinner, I would sit for 30 minutes, dinner, class for 3.5 hours, get home, transition, sit for an hour of meditation, thank goodness, and then transition to do papers for 2.5 or 3 more hours, right? Just because that's what the time frame happened to be. It's not forever, it was just for that time. But just in terms of building a mindfulness meditation practice, that was very helpful for me to transition through even just getting through a daily basis, okay? All right, so that's a lot of talking. And there's just a little bit more. Okay, so just building up your own practice. So for those who don't have something already cultivated, these were very helpful to me when I first started out, right? So really just making the time to meditate, wherever that begins for you. Again, whether it's 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Again, I'm pretty seasoned, so I do my regular 2 hours a day. I do an hour in the morning and I do an hour at night before I go to bed. But that's only because I've cultivated that for myself and that's what works for me, right? And then I also have a designated space. So I know that I have moved many times, whether they were houses, apartments, whatever. The first thing, interestingly enough, that I always happened to look for was that little space that I could call my own, where I could practice for a seated meditation practice, whether it was a chair set up in a corner or in a specific area that you felt calming, that there wasn't like a lot of distraction or that was in view of like a television or any of that stuff, that you could be away from the electronics, maybe they might be in the other room, all that stuff, because it's really the time that you're giving to yourself. And then for some folks, it's very helpful to set intentions, right? So depending on what the day is like, I just know during the pandemic, at least for the space that I was in, every day I would set intentions of gratitude. Because I wasn't susceptible to the larger population that was being affected, right, by the symptoms or even catching it, contagious of COVID-19, right? So gratitude was a big one. And actually gratitude was primarily it throughout and continues to be so for me, right? So that was my intention for a lot of it and continues to be so, but it could be other things: kindness, compassion, empathy, lovingness to yourself, you know, whatever you're feeling that day, okay? Heart space work. Also trying to be consistent with something. I know that when I started, it was like, okay, I'm lucky I'm going to get to this once a week. And now for me, again, just based on where I am with my practice, the day doesn't feel complete unless I get my 2 hours in. Again, and that's just for me. For some of you, it may be just like 10 minutes that you can get in the middle of your day, or 30 minutes for some people when they kick off their morning or when they close out for the evening, right? It really will really depend on you, just as long as you're doing it consistently. And then again, building up community to do something with. So I do sit with the virtual community, which is what helps me sustain a consistent practice, that hour in the morning and then that hour in the evening. And they're at set times. So I know I set aside that time for myself in my designated space to do my sit, right? Because there's really, there's something to be said about the collective and the energy behind what we do when we do sit in a mindfulness practice. And then also for yourself, if there are just thoughts that you feel like you need to jot down, either prior to sitting or after. So we're gonna actually do that today, right, before we get started. So that's just a little preview and understanding of helping you to build a practice if you don't already have one, or just helping you keep these things in mind as you continue to do some sort of practice, okay? All right, so breaking out that pen or pencil or piece of paper, let's do that now, moving into the practice, okay? Even before we get into the belly breathing. So I'm gonna put my timer on for 2 minutes, and you are going to write down what's on your mind or how are you feeling? What's on your mind or how are you feeling? Look at that, I already had my timer down to 20 minutes. Time starts now. So write down what's on your mind or how you are feeling. What's on your mind or how are you feeling? And keep writing, just 1 more minute to go, 1 more minute to go. And the last 15 seconds. Okay, my friends. And then if you want to put the writing utensil down. So The way that it's going to work in this series for the week is we're going to progress in time per day. Today, we're going to start out with 10 minutes. Tomorrow will be 15. Thursday will be 20. And then Friday will be 25 minutes. We could do it. Okay. So, and I have designated meditations for each day to build that up. And remember, always coming back to the breath. Okay. And we're always going to start every series, every day with belly breathing so that you can get used to coming back into the body and becoming aware of the breath. That will further allow you to relax into lengthening the time that we sit in seated meditation practice. Well, for some, if you can't sit, maybe you're standing. Okay. Or I was just going to say, or maybe lying down. And I actually don't encourage lying down, because we want to be able to actually be in an active position to allow one to build the mindfulness practice. Because if you're lying down, there's probably a pretty good chance that you'd fall asleep. Maybe I'm just projecting, because I would fall asleep. Okay, all right. So finding a comfortable seated posture on your chair or wherever you're seated, or if you're standing, you're welcome to do that. If you're standing, extend the fingertips down, lift the chest, roll the shoulders down the back, and allow yourself to charge the legs. What do I mean by that? And notice engaging the muscles all along the legs and under the soles of the feet. Okay. And allow yourself to just get comfortable into standing. The same goes for seated. If you haven't already, soles of the feet are on the ground, bending the knees at a 90-degree angle. Okay. Palms of the hands, if you're seated on a cushion or on a chair, palms of the hands are on the knees or the thighs. If you're seated in a chair, knees hip-width distance apart. And then everybody lift the chest. Roll the shoulders down the back. Straightening the spine. And again, allowing the muscles to relax. And then again, I invite you to close the eyes. Or if you're keeping the eyes open, taking the gaze inward and down. And then coming into the breath, we're going to kick it off with 5 breaths of belly breathing. Inhale through the nose. If you can, exhale through the nose. If you can't exhale through the nose, exhale through the mouth. Inhale through the nose. Notice the breath moving through the chest, moving down into the belly. And then exhaling from the belly, through the chest, out through the nose, or out through the mouth. 3 more. Inhale. And exhale from the belly, through the chest, through the nose or the mouth. And inhale. And exhale. And inhale. And exhale. Then continuing to keep the eyes closed or the gaze inward and down. On the next breath, just briefly check in with the body, allowing the shoulders to drop. And continuing to soften the muscles around the abdomen. just inviting that kindness both into the body and the mind and in through that relaxation. And as you continue to keep the eyes closed or the gaze inward and down, keep lifting the chest and notice where you can feel the breath in the body. You might notice it in the abdomen, or in the chest, or in the nostrils. And for right now, just pick one place where you can feel the breath moving easily. Just allow yourself to rest with the sensations of the breath in this one spot. And then begin counting the breaths. Inhale and exhale with awareness. And count 1, inhale, exhale. And count 2, inhale, 1, 2. And exhale, 2, 1. And continue to keep counting like this up to 5. And then starting back at 1 again. As you continue to keep the eyes closed or the gaze inward and down, just remembering that the counting serves as an aid or a tool to help you practice. It allows the mind something extra to focus on. And just aligning with that kindness to ourselves. Remember, this is not a competition or any measurement of how well you're doing. You're just stepping into this moment. And if you happen to notice that the mind wanders, just allow it to keep coming back to the breath. And just begin back up as many times as necessary. And just notice for any judgment that may arise. Just let go of any harsh or unkind self-talk that might be coming up. then as you continue like this, counting the breaths and building the focus, again, if the mind happens to wander, just allow yourself to notice it. And then when you notice that the mind is super concentrated or focused, again, you just allow the mind to notice it. And then on the next breath, keeping the eyes closed or the gaze inward and down, allowing the chin to drop towards the chest, stretching out the back of the neck. And then on the next breath, slowly opening the eyes, allowing the gaze to come into focus at its own time. And then on the next breath, slowly lifting the chin up. And when you're ready, meeting me back on the screen. All right, my friends, that was actually 10 minutes. I thought that was very fast. That could just be me. But you want to continue throughout your day just noticing what your mind has a tendency to focus on and when it wanders. And then notice if you automatically go back to your breath. It's a great tool, right? We just used a great example of it.